Meg walked into CDL class, confident as ever, ready to start a new career in long-haul trucking. She had booked a ticket to North Dakota, done with city life, treadmill, rat race. From now on, if she was going to run, she was sure as hell going to move. Big money was pouring out of the oil fields, and it was hers for the taking. She was bright-eyed and ready to start learning, but she was one of many. 20 students in all, each one wanting to be among the few who would make it to the end. As she walked in and took a seat, her aloof arrogance began to rub everyone the wrong way immediately. You can take the girl out of the city, but you can't get her off her phone. When the instructor finally showed up, her classmates they braced themselves in impatient anticipation, but to their horror, she continued with her loud conversation, laughing madly as the instructor, who had stopped to really let this image soak in, finally interrupted and told her phones were not allowed. Jake Brown, a 43-year-old military vet, fresh off a long stint in the oil rigs, was covered in grease.
"I've seen a lot in my working days," he remarked. "I one time saw a tractor-trailer hauling 40 tons of dynamite get caught up on the train tracks. The explosion damn near measured on the Richter scale. Cost 80 grand to clean up. But when I saw that girl, what's her name? Yeah, when I saw Meg walk into class, I had never seen a bigger train wreck in my life." Meg stormed out of the class to continue conversation, which had now become angry and belligerent.
"Yes, you picked up the dog, and now you are going to walk it. What's the big deal?"
she yelled over the phone. Others in the class listened in stunned silence. The big deal, however, was that she was talking to a Lyft driver. Dog walking wasn't part of their responsibilities. She had already been kicked off other rideshare apps for similar violations. She hadn't been able to bring Puddles, her attention-craving Cocker Spaniel, out to the Dakotas, and it was really a sad state of affairs. Her instructor, however, had no sympathy, and she could begin to sense that everyone was losing their patience quick. So she hung up angrily and sat down, still huffing. She was able to get it together for the remainder of class and soak up the information she was going to need to pass the required state exams. Learning had always been easy to her. High SAT scores, UMass pedigree with Harvard potential, and she was able to obtain her Class A permit very quickly, thanks to brother, who had connections in the industry. He wasn't a trucker, just an up-and-coming stud at a huge transportation company in Florida. He could get her a permit with one call to the North Dakota DMV. No lines or testing required. He had that kind of pull. He was that motherfucker. Rumors have been surfacing that he was let go after committing a certain safety violation at work. We are not here to confirm or deny that. What we do know is that she would have passed even without his help. She was school smart, Yale pedigree. But none of that mattered here. And if she thought she could rest on her laurels, she was in for a rude awakening. Class ended. Men and women stood up and would disperse like tumbleweeds across the relentlessly windy Dakota plains and on towards their trailers and cheap motels. Meg's notebooks were full, her brain buzzing. State exams aced, she assumed. However, when she went to leave, she heard a voice over her shoulder. "So you think you're hot shit, don't you?" a man said.
"Excuse me?" she ventured.
"No, really," he continued. "These are some of the best test scores I've ever seen." The man's name was Chuck Baker, CDL Class A instructor, 20 years in the trucking biz, former Marine, Hell's Angel tattoo on his neck. But that was in the past. Now he taught students from all over the country to drive truck. He knew people. He sized them up quick. And the minute he saw this blonde-headed girl from the big city walk through his door, he was taken aback and immediately dismissed her. "You know, when he first looked at you," he told her as she stood in the doorway, "I didn't think you stood a chance out here." but your test scores make me second-guess myself. They are high. You've been studying."
"What do you expect?" she quickly replied.
"Look, I'm impressed with the preparation," he would continue. "But all that library-type brainy smarts isn't going to do you a lick of good when you're behind the wheel of one of these monsters. Tomorrow we go to the yard, and in the meantime, you might want to try adjusting your attitude. I'll be damned if I'm going to let some blonde-headed brat from the East Coast run my class."
"How did you know I'm from the East Coast?" she asked.
"Just don't be late tomorrow," he said.
Training day 2. Yard movements, breaks, turns, the basics. But instructor Chuck Baker wanted to take it up a notch. You see, Meg wasn't the only one in the class who needed to change her ways. And CDL Class A instructor and former Marin Chuck Baker was going to give them all a swift kick in the rear. He was going to put them to the test, weed out the invalids, because half of them looked like they were strung out on meth, and the other half were doing crazy pills. Some only had a clean driving record because they had spent most of the last 10 years in prison. Anthony Brown, one of the few students who were on the straight and narrow, commented to News Center 5 on what he called a crisis. "You got guys working crazy hours, keeping themselves awake on crazy juice and hauling 10-ton loads of dangerous cargo. Someone could get hurt, or even worse. The regulators turn a blind eye, though, I tell you. This country runs on oil." Instructor Chuck knew of these risks, and he wasn't going to let any bad apples through his course. One such bad apple had come all the way from Alabama. Name was Levy Briggs. Rail thin, tank top, arms covered in tats, and eyes like a fox. "Yeah, we got a pretty good class this season," Instructor Chuck would remark in his interview with News Center 5. "Some are a bit rough around the edges, but I got high hopes." But underneath the bravado of an ex-Marine, he wasn't so sure, especially when it came to that Briggs character. There was rough around the edges, and then there was dangerous. Levy had aced his exams and was always on time, and even early. But this morning he had been a bit too early. What had he been doing there before everyone? No time to dwell. Brake checks were scheduled. Meg was having a bad hair day. It was a total mess, and she was tired. The swift North Dakota crosswinds only made it worse, so she was glad to get in her truck. She had painted her name on the side of the trailer in giant block letters. The cabin was also customized to fit her needs. Everyone else just hopped in a random truck and put the pedal to the metal. They stopped about an hour later when they came to the top of North Dakota's most enormous and formidable hill. It was famous for overheating brakes and rendering them useless, and there was an escape ramp about 2/3 of the way down the mile-long slope. Instructor Chuck Baker, former Marine and ex-Hell's Angel, thought this would be perfect to weed out the students who didn't have the mental fortitude or the grits in their britches needed to be a trucker. Looking down the hill they were all about to descend, Meg's bowels were cooking up their own batch of grits. They all had mixed emotions, nerves, excitement. "Baker must have lost his damn mind," one student protested. "This reeks like a creek full of dogs." They weren't happy. Neither was Brad, a Baltimore-raised and Badlands-born hothead who just swung up from Dallas. Cornrows, gold grills, the whole nine. He exchanged glances with Meg. "Did you say your name was Brad?" she inquired. "Yes, indeed, Miss Meg, that's my name. Best you can believe me on that. My father worked with a guy named Brad out in the Badlands." "Did you now? A guy named Dan," she said. "Oh, no way. Get out of here," Brett exclaimed. "Of course I knew him. He was my roommate. Dan Perry was one of the greatest men I've ever met. After working in the Badlands, I headed down to Dallas, but I came back to cash in on that black gold. After all, they don't call me Brad from nothing. Anyways, How is your brother?"
"Oh, She paused. "He's around."
"Good luck out there," Brad told her with a twinkle in his teeth right before hopping in his truck and rolling away. Several students had already successfully made it to the bottom, keeping their truck in a low gear and braking when necessary. She knew how to do this, in theory, but it was her time to roll, and she was going to have to actually physically pull it off. Meg was so small and petite that she had to wear moon boots just to reach the pedals. If her moon boots slipped off the brake and hit the gas, she could be in real trouble. She had to concentrate. However, very quickly after starting her descent down the winding 2-lane stretch of road, she realized something was wrong. Her brakes didn't seem to be working. "It must be my moon boots," she thought to herself. "Moon boot emergency." But after examining the situation down there, the boots were making perfect contact with the brake, and she kept speeding up. Maybe she was hitting the gas by accident. That must be it. On a truck, they must be switched. Nope, not the case. And now she was going even faster after stomping on the gas on the off chance that it was really the brake. She began to panic. She swerved frantically back towards center as she had veered off course. She kept a tight grip on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. You can do it. Faster. Her mind raced as she tried to think of what to do. If she continued, she would surely crash into all her fellow truck students who were high-fiving at the bottom of the hill. Winding around treacherous passes and avoiding oncoming traffic, she sped on. Then, blue lights. The cops. She was speeding at this point. Sirens blazed, but a light bulb in her mind went off as she remembered something from her book. Escape ramps. On some treacherous hills, there were escape ramps built solely for trucks whose brakes had given out. As the cop followed, she cringed. 120 now, up to 140 miles per hour. It was like a literal missile headed towards all her classmates who had gathered their trucks in the middle of the road and were blocking traffic because they were inexperienced. But then, hallelujah, she saw a sign. Escape ramp 1 mile. She held on for dear life. Escape ramps usually have gravel to slow down the 14-ton beast vehicles that it needs to handle. She sent up a prayer, turned, and plowed through that gravel like it was made of corn flour. When the dust settled, she called her brother Dan in Florida and asked him what to do. "You're gonna need to get towed out of there," he said. "Gonna run you $4 or $5 grand, but don't worry, I already Venmo'd you the money." $5 grand was pocket change to him, and he didn't hesitate. Class act. By the time the tow trucks had arrived, Instructor Chuck Baker had run up the hill and told them to let him take a look at the truck before they hauled it away. "The brakes were all mangled," he concluded in a grave, monotone voice, "and I think I know who did it." Investigators watched the security footage from that morning. It showed one of the students, who had apparently showed up very early, ducking under the vehicle with tools that could be used to fix, but also to damage. Baker was furious. They had to hold him back. "I knew it was Briggs," he shouted. Levy Briggs, tatted-up Ruffington, who was too smart for his own damn good, had acted out of pure jealousy. He wasn't going to let anyone, especially no darn Yankee, get in the way of his paycheck. No blonde-headed female was going to be eating out of his food bucket. He didn't come all the way to North Dakota to wipe anyone's ass. And it had been him who showed up early. He knew exactly which truck to target. The big block lettering that said Meg's Truck had made that part easy. Ultimately, the authorities acted quickly. They sent him home to Mississippi, where his fat wife was going to beat him with a wooden spoon. Seemed fitting. "Thought I'd find you here." Brett's voice carried a flat tone that calmly sliced through the dark, smoky atmosphere of the club.
Yeah, what do you want? Meg replied defensively. Some sort of reward for finding me?
Nah, Ms. Megan, Brett replied. I just wanted to see if the rumors were true. I had to see it with my own eyes.
Word around town was that the female trucker involved in the incident at North Dakota's most infamous hill had quit, taken to the pole.
Girls gotta make a living somehow out here in these parts,
she told Brett coldly. She hadn't broken her routine.
Of course, Ms. Megan. But with all due respect, I thought that's what trucking was gonna be for.
You saw what happened back there, she said. Damn near almost died going down that slope. About 6 weeks had passed since the incident. The following couple of weeks, she had continued going to class, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Like her brakes might go out again. Like this trucking life just wasn't for her. And then money started getting tight in the motels, and she turned to the only opportunity she saw. The $1 bills started flooding the stage, and she vanished from class. Brett lingered, looking for the right words. You gonna just stand there? She scolded.
I'll come clean, he muttered. Chuck sent me here. He thought maybe I could talk some sense into you. You got potential. He sees, and I see it too. And we need to pass that test. Get your CDL. Something big is coming down the pipe, and it involves truckers, black gold, and the governor himself wants Chuck to put together a squad that can handle the load.
Well, my mind's made up, she stated with finality. Brett walked off into the chilly night. Peer members of class that still remained were a little bummed that Brett hadn't talked Meg into coming back, but they had state exams to pass and couldn't afford to lose focus. Chuck, however, had expected Brett to come back empty-handed. It was actually all part of the plan. Combating if he walked in the club barking at her, she was going to scare away for good. He was going to give it time. There was 2 weeks until the big oil event where the Governor Tracy needed a bunch of oil to be hauled. The oil trucks would have to go up that very same hill, the infamous hill that nearly took her out. And he knew he needed her.
The following week, Brett, Anthony Brown, and a couple other top remaining candidates would nail their state exams and sign on with a couple of different companies. Meg still had her routine. It was like Groundhog Day to her, and she had plenty of paper money to pay the motel. But Chuck was getting nervous that she might skip town. He had sent Brett in to talk to her that week prior, but only just to test the waters. But he had one more ace up his sleeve. He had waited this long, intentionally. The nightlife had to be wearing on her. In fact, she was getting a bit fed up with a few of the regulars. But maybe she could take her act to the big leagues. Vegas, Hollywood. There were endless possibilities out there for a girl like her with Harvard pedigree. And she was just about ready to let the Dakota winds blow her someplace a little brighter. Chuck had to act fast. That night, he got a call from Governor Tracy. "You ready for the pipeline opening?" "Ready as ever," Chuck would fib. "I know you must be a crack squad assembled by now," the governor went on. "All right then, sounds good. Just meet us at the ribbon cutting next Friday for the opening event." A team of 5 was needed. Chuck knew he had a few people he could get. Brett would be the 4th. His 5th member, however, could be leaving town any day now. But all he could do was try and get some sleep. Megan from Massachusetts, the long-lived East Coast, had bags packed and ready to go. The wanderlust had gotten to her. The dark highway casinos had sung their last karaoke. The empty mic collected dust on the hollow stage. She was Vegas bound, and was just getting ready to call a taxi. She heard a knock on the door. She opened trepidatiously, thinking it could be one of the men from the club. Oh, geez, even worse. It was Chuck Baker.
Oh, what is this? Good cop, bad cop? She asked. Whatever you got to say, you better make it quick, because I got a train to catch.
Talk to me a minute before you go. I need you for the grand opening. We'll be hauling oil up the infamous hill, and you're the only one who can handle it. I know you got rattled, but you've had plenty of time to settle your nerves. Briggs is gone. That crap ain't gonna happen again. You can get on that plane, Baker said, but you'll always be left wondering.
Well, you need a better speechwriter, Meg would shoot back, because you are missing the mark and barking up the wrong tree.
There was a long pause. He looked her in the eye and wasn't sure if all the potential he saw was an illusion. I guess Briggs gets the last laugh then, he muttered, before turning away and getting in his truck. Meg wasn't convinced, but she was silent. She didn't have any more to say, and she didn't call the taxi. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched the shadows creep across the floor and thought of what she had to lose. Absolutely nothing. She wasn't ready to tell Chuck, though. She wasn't quite ready to give him the satisfaction, and she still wasn't sure she had it in her. She gave Bredd a ring instead and told him that she would consider driving at the big event, but on one condition. Meg Truck had to be reborn, rise from the ashes. Her truck, the one she had personalized in every way, was sitting in a junkyard awaiting demolition. She was going to sneak in, give it CPR, a tune-up, parts overhaul, extra horsepower for the event with the big hill. It was going to be a spectacle, or nothing. There was no going halfway. Bredd thought the idea was crazy, but he met her there early the next morning. "I really hope I don't get in trouble," he whispered loudly. "If we get caught, you need to take the fall, and I'm going to play dumb." Meanwhile, at the State House, Governor Tracy was cutting the blue ribbon with a giant pair of scissors. Everyone was celebrating. Former Marine and highly respected CDL instructor Chuck Baker, however, was sweeting bullets. Only 3 trucks had arrived. Baker needed 2 more, and he managed to sneak in a few phone calls to colleagues, but there was no answer. All busy. Darn it. "I hope all is well, Baker." Tracy came over and greeted him jovially. "And I do assume the 2 additional trucks will be arriving shortly," he said, half grimacing. "Oh, of course, Governor," Baker lied. Tracy gave him a firm pat on the back and sauntered off to greet the other bigwigs and donors. There were minutes till the trucks needed to be filled with oil and make their way up the infamous hill. "Baker, the trucks." And he didn't sound too happy. "Oh, of course. There they are. You never disappoint, do you, Chuck?" Meg and Bredd both appeared in separate big rigs, rolling down the highway like neon mirage that couldn't be true. Meg's truck was totally decked out in neon signage, the vehicle renamed. It was purring like a kitten after a complete engine overhaul that Bredd said was necessary to carry such a huge amount of flammable oil. She was going to haul the mother load. She was the only one with grace and fortitude. The 2 of them then stopped behind the 3 other 18-wheelers and loaded up like nothing was unusual. Bredd stuck to the plan. The other 3 drivers were on point. Meg was given an absolute mother load and required escort vehicles carrying a sign that read, "Oversized Load." She handled the twists and turns like no other. The moon boots delivered exquisitely in the realm of pedal control, and the extra engine power was needed. And the rest is history. The neon megamobile riding with power. And Chuck? Well, Chuck's got a hell of a story to tell his new students.